in the Twin Cities. Monday morning at 8:30 a.m. in Chanhassen in Carver County. At the Carver County Courthouse, there will be a hearing that will be, I guess, the first step in the process of attempting to settle Prince's estate. Right now, no will has been produced, and it does not appear that he had one. So the will will have to go through, or his estate will have to go through the probate process. Under Minnesota law, because he had no children, he had no spouse, his parents are not alive, his heirs, as it stands right now, are his siblings. And he had one full-blooded sister and then 6 half-siblings, one of whom passed away. So they have filed a motion and set up a trust that the judges approved to take care of the handling of this estate. There have already been at least one claim, somebody filing late last week saying that he was actually the rightful owner, this California man, rightful owner of all Prince's music, and he said that he and Prince had an agreement, a verbal agreement going back to the 1990s. He had actually sued Prince, I think in the 1990s, claiming that he was the rightful owner of Prince's music. It's obviously going to get incredibly complicated and difficult. Larry Kallevig is from the Haven Financial Group, and he's going to talk us through some of this. Larry, first of all, did I pronounce your name correctly?
You did very well, Esme.
Okay, well, thank you very much. Let me ask you, how messy do you think this is going to get?
Well, there's a lot at stake here, and with many estimates at $300 million in royalties, and with his music still to come in, there's lots of opportunity, unfortunately. And it's going to have to go through, as you mentioned, the probate process, which is the process of settling the estate after one's gone. And with contestation and disputes and already somebody coming forth, obviously it could get very ugly.
You know, I've been told that that there have been other famous celebrities that have died without wills, musicians, among them Jimi Hendrix and also Jerry Garcia. And apparently those, especially Jerry Garcia, who had the vast catalog of written music, it was just a complete mess and was very, very expensive and very lengthy. How much does that hurt the estate when you get something that's very complicated and it gets drawn out in this long legal battle?
Without any legal estate plan, the opportunity exists. But actually, I used to have a list of famous people and how their estate settled, and I think you could probably find that online. But it's amazing how even those most prominent, you would think they would have their ducks in a row, and unfortunately, things happen, and it doesn't always turn out so good.
You know, I do have a question for you. What are your thoughts? Apparently, there's these vast numbers. It's not just 26 albums. I've known people who have been in this vault at Paisley Park, and they say that there are hundreds of recordings there. In addition to complete albums, there are also many, many fully produced music videos where they were done by top flight production companies that have never been released. There's documentary footage. There's all kinds of things. For some of this music, Prince had said in interviews that he had kind of put it in the vault because he wanted to go. It wasn't ready to be released, but he wanted to go back and rework it. What happens to something like that when there's sort of a record that maybe he didn't want it to be released?
Well, again, that would have been stated if there was a legal estate plan, that could have been mapped out by him. Unfortunately, now it's going to be deciphered from others who really don't know what his wishes are, and obviously that falls upon the will that does not exist. So now it's going to be up to others to figure out, well, what would he wanted, and we may be talking way more than we even think.
Somebody else brought up to me that had he had put everything he owned in a trust, he could have kept it private. This was a man who was so intensely private, and that Frank Sinatra apparently was somebody who did have everything in a trust, so nobody really knows how much Frank Sinatra was worth when he died. What does a trust do, and is that just something for people who are super rich and super famous and have all this intellectual property?
That's the misconception. That's why we believe it's so important to work with an attorney that specializes in estate planning, because naturally the first thing that people think of is, a will, which is absolutely important. It's your wishes. But for many, that will is not going to do everything that one potentially wants, because a will is just a wish. people look at a revocable living trust, irrevocable, other things. And yes, it can maintain the privacy, keep everything, ease of distribution. You can have controls that you certainly can't have with the will, because the will, contrary to what many people think, does not avoid probate in itself. So look at all options.
And why does a will not avoid probate?
A will in itself is just your wishes, and if your estate exceeds $50,000 of assets, which naturally his does, $300 million and maybe way more, that qualifies you for the formal probate process, and therefore it just does not. Things have changed, laws have changed, the process has changed.
So even if you have a will, what gets, if you have a will, what would get your case into the probate system? Because I think there are a lot of people listening who have, estates. Most, if you own a home, it's probably worth more than $50,000. In most cases, what is it that can even get you dragged into the probate process, even if you have a will?
Assets that exceed $50,000, titles, deeds, and accounts, or any real estate. And if you own real estate in multiple states, you may be subject to probate in other states. But many people think that a will avoids. That is why many people use a revocable living trust. Not saying everybody needs that by any means, but they use that as a means of avoidance of probate and ease of distribution.
So a revocable trust, you're saying, and what's the difference between a revocable trust and irrevocable trust?
Changeable and not changeable. Giving up control of assets while you're living, or staying in control of the assets while you're still alive, becoming irrevocable upon death.
Got it. Okay. And is that something where if you have one of those, can you avoid getting hauled into probate?
It's the biggest reason people use them is avoidance of probate and staying in control of matters upon your demise and privacy. Privacy.
Okay. And that's something that I think is definitely something that Prince certainly he was he lived his life according to that principle.
Right.
In terms of when something is in the probate process, so will this all play out publicly?
Probate is a public. Now, what the judge decides is up to him, but it is a public process that will be made. It'll be made public. Absolutely.
And what happens? There's a guy who's filed a claim and who says he and Prince had a verbal agreement, which seems absurd. To hand over all of his music, something that obviously is worth hundreds of millions of dollars. Even though that seems like an absurd claim, I guess you have to go through that process and litigate it, don't you?
Absolutely. It's in the hands of the court and the judge. And if they plead a good case and make a good case, anything's possible.
All right. In terms of the amount of time and money this is going to cost to go through the probate process, I mean, do you have any kind of a ballpark?
I do not. In fact, it could take months. It can take years. It depends upon the make of the estate. Real estate tends to muddy the water more than anything. And obviously, when you're dealing with a legal process, the longer we're talking, it could be thousands and thousands and thousands of dollars.
And those costs are borne by the estate, right?
That is correct.
All right. Well, and I don't know how many properties he had just in Chanhassen. I mean, it's well over 10. But the value, the Carver County estimated value, which is probably on the low end, just in Carver County alone, is in excess of $31 million. And this is just the value assigned by Carver County. Why would that muddy the waters?
Because real estate and deeds and those things tend to go slower through the court process than if you didn't have those things. Any real estate sets you up for the formal probate process. If you don't have real estate, things can be a lot more simple. And, of course, he had lots of real estate.
Even though he's the clear taxpayer and owner?
Correct, but he's no longer here. So, therefore, who do they divvy up that land and real estate to? Well, is it to his sister or to his other half-siblings, or does this guy have claim to some of this? And all of that has to go through the formal process.
Okay, because right now it appears the siblings seem to be on the same page. Could that change?
It could change. I did like to see. I thought that was a great decision when they appointed a special administrator. If anything is subject to change, of course, it's not just them in the picture. It's others that can dispute and contest, verbal, nonverbal, written, anything of that nature could come forward at any time, and then that just delays the process.
Yeah, and then you think about these, apparently, for example, these music videos that are again, these, what I've been told, fully produced music videos. Obviously, there were people who directed and produced and shot them and edited them. I would think that, if those things got released, somebody might say, well, hey, I was the editor. I want my share.
This is a very, very unique situation with very little to compare it to, and only time will tell, unfortunately, how it all plays out.
In terms of real estate and the real estate holdings, I mean, Paisley Park is valued at $7 million. There's a property around the corner valued at $13 million that is enormous, that is much, much larger than Paisley Park. It borders two lakes, and apparently he used to live there. He had a mansion there, and he tore it down, and now it's just these sort of gates. That's valued at $13 million. All of these different properties, do they sort of go, and again, I don't have the exact number, it's in excess of 10 just in Carver County. Do they have to kind of go property by property? And does each one take time?
Each one takes time. They have to go one by one, and they got to cover everything that he had. Whereas if it was in a revocable trust, all of that could have been avoided. Ease of distribution, all of the formal process could have been avoided. Unfortunately, it's too late.
And so they could have, like if it had been an irrevocable trust, they could have gotten. There would have probably been sort of a wish saying, "Oh, I want you to sell it all and split up the proceeds," or something like that.
He would have had complete control, and just like you said, give it to so-and-so or a charity or whatever. That's the controls with the revocable trust or irrevocable that a will just doesn't have. But unfortunately, his own will would have been better than the state will, which is what's happening in this case.